Well, the first question about tanks we often ask ourselves, why do we need tanks in the first place? Well, the story's a little complicated and also, as obvious as it is, we need better armor. Not just like dummy armor, but armors which can move itself and also kill some. I mean, they really did, especially in World War II. When there's a tank coming, they say, you're going to get hurt. Building a tank structure is relatively easy. The problem is how you'd move them around. Some were awfully bad, like awfully bad. The Japanese weren't fond of them, it seems, but did they really need tanks? Japanese occupation was around mainly water. There's a lot of ocean in the Pacific for the Japs, so it makes sense. Well, today's going to be different. From the first British Mark I tank, first used in World War I, to the largest tank ever built. Let's look at the 10 largest tanks, and it's gonna get crazy. Number 10. KV-2, USSR. The KV-2 had destroyed about 24 tanks by the end of the engagement. In certain situations, even a single KV-2 supported by infantry could halt German formations during Operation Barbarossa. The Klement Voroshilov Tank 2 had armor so thick that no German panzer or anti-tank weapon at the time could penetrate it. Although this was a great achievement, the KV-2 was not a practical weapon that could be used very effectively. The speed and poor traverse of KV-2 made it unsuitable for spearheading attacks in a way that the T-34 could. Its maximum speed was just 28 kilometers per hour and had an operational range of some 200 kilometers. It had a size of 45 tons mass, 6.75 meters in length, 3.32 meter width, 2.71 meter height. Number 9. The Panzer VI Tiger II, Germany. The Germans. What would we know about wars if it wasn't for the Germans? The Tiger II was the successor to the Tiger I, combining the Tiger I's thick armor with the armor sloped. They were the Germans' main battle tanks. It's known as the largest tank in action during World War II. The Tiger II was more agile than it looks. Weighing as heavy as it did, one would expect it to be snail-like in terms of movement. However, it had a road speed of 20 miles per hour against the roughly 30 miles per hour Shermans or the T-34s. These tanks had a reputation of being over-engineered and too sophisticated. Coming to the size, it had a height of 3.09 meters, width of 3.755 meters, length of 7.38 meters hull, and 10.286 meters with the gun forward. Mass of 68.5 tons. Number 8. Char II-C, France. The Char II-C was designed during the latter half of the First World War in an effort to break the stalemate of trench warfare. The expectations were sky high for the French tank, with the stage set to become the definitive breakthrough armored vehicle to plow through no man's land and the German trenches of the Western Front. Protected by a 45mm thick armor and armed with a powerful 75mm cannon and up to 8 machine guns, the Char II-C was meant to be the hound of the battlefield. In many ways, it was remarkable. It had a very heavy gun for the time and thick armor, but suffered from extremely low power output, which significantly hindered the tank's cross-country ability. The Char II-C also had what is likely the largest tanker crew ever, 12. Size-wise, it was a behemoth. 69 tons mass, a length of 10.27 meters, width of 3 meters, and height of 4.09 meters. Number 7. Panzer VII Low, Germany. The Germans again. But this time it's not really that much of action rather than a prototype. Panzer VII Low had several designs varying in configuration, armament, and armor that were drafted. However, the project was cancelled after the Führer made the decision to develop even heavier tanks, like the Panzer VIII Maus. It was to weigh 76 tons with 100mm in frontal armor, a center-mounted turret, and a coaxial machine gun with a top speed of 27 kilometers per hour. That's pretty much what we know about this mysterious tank of the Third Reich. Number 6. T-28, USA. The T-28 is the only super heavy tank the Americans have ever tried. It wasn't designed to fight other tanks, but to deal with heavy fortifications. It was so heavy that it had to have 4 sets of tracks instead of the usual 2. But in a war of maneuver, its weight was a major drawback, and none ever saw combat. Unlike the Super Heavies produced in Germany, this tank would be a low-profile, turretless machine with the gun mounted in the hull before it was even given to a production facility. Its size was 95 short tons in mass, a length of 36 feet 6 inches, width of 14 feet 11 inches, and a height of 9 feet 4 inches. Number 5. T-42 USSR. The T-42, also known as the TG-5, was a super heavy tank project of the interwar period. Development did not advance past the stage of construction drawings and scale models. Sadly, the design was passed over in favor of the T-35 project, which was already at the prototype stage. The layout of the T-42 was similar to the T-35. It had 5 turrets. Like most super heavy tanks developed in the 1920s to 1930s around the world, the T-42 had almost no practical utility. The sheer size and weight of such a tank made it a perfect target, despite anti-air measures, and the movement characteristics of the tank were also endowed. Not much is known about the dimensions of the tank, except the fact that it was supposed to weigh as massive as 101.6 tons. Number 4. OI, Japan. OI was the name given to a proposed series of Japanese super heavy tanks to be used in the Pacific Theater. The vehicle was to be very heavy and was supposed to carry 11 crewmen. The complete history of the OI is unknown due to the obscure nature of the project and the limited documentation known to have survived post-war. The development process was done by the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. So why did the Japanese drop this beast? Well, you can say that they had the ocean to be worried about more, and that the size seemed almost impossible to maneuver it. Its size, however, was a mass of 120 plus tons, a length of 10 meters, 4.2 meters wide, and 4 meters high. Number 3. The Panzerkampfwagen E-100, Germany. Oh boy, and the Germans again. I mean, one of the little reasons the Germans lost this battle of the world was because the egoistic Führer wasted much of its fortune in this superficial designs. One of the reasons is the Panzerkampfwagen E-100, which was designed and developed towards the end of World War II. By the end of the war, the chassis of the prototype E-100 had been partially completed. It was shipped to the United Kingdom for trials, but was later scrapped. The design had removable side skirts and narrow transport tracks to make rail transport more viable. The design was very similar to the original Tiger Mouse proposal, but had larger 900mm diameter road wheels and a new coil spring-based suspension rather than the original torsion bars. A new turret was designed, intended to be simpler and lighter than the Mouse turret. Size-wise, it had a mass of 123 tons, length of 11.07 meters with gun, or 8.73 meters without gun, and a width of 4.48 meters. Number 2. Mendeleev Tank, USSR. Although this tank was not made possible to be built, it deserves a place in this list. The Mendeleev tank was a proposed early tank design by Russian naval engineer Vasily Mendeleev, son of Russian scientist Dmitry Mendeleev, who created the modern periodic table. The vehicle was envisioned by Mendeleev during 1911 to 1915, in which its purpose was to be a land ship immune to all enemy fire and able to cross large battlefields while providing heavy artillery support to troops using a 120mm machine gun. The Mendeleev-Rybinsk tank was very unorthodox in design, featuring very interesting gas bladders. This pneumatic suspension allowed the front part of the vehicle to be lowered even while it was in motion. In terms of size, it had a mass of approximately 173.2 tons, length of 13 meters with the gun, 10-meter hull, and a height of 4.45 meters. Honorable mention: the Land Cruiser P1000 Rat, Germany. Okay, by this time the Germans have gone crazy. The Rat was supposed to be the largest tank in the world, but like any other story, we gotta know about tanks. You must have figured how this ended, right? This impossible beast would have had twin-linked battleship cannons and a rotating turret mounted on it that would shoot 280mm shells at their enemies, as well as numerous other small arms and anti-aircraft weapons. It would have had to have been manned by a 40-man crew, and it would have had a vehicle bay large enough to store a reconnaissance motorcycle squadron. Mass: 1,000 tons. Length: 35-meter hull, 39-meter with gun forward. Width: 14-meter. Height: 11 meters. Number 1. The Panzer VIII Maus, Germany. The German Panzer VIII tank of World War II, codenamed the Maus tank, was intended to be the biggest, best armored, and most powerful tank ever built. And the prototypes that were built succeeded in achieving these goals. However, the Maus tank, initially called the Mammoth or Mammoth tank, never ended up seeing combat, so we can only speculate about how effective they would have been in battle. 5 were ordered to be built, but only 2 hulls and 1 turret were completed, the turret being attached before the testing grounds were captured by advancing Soviet military forces. Some historians believe that if enough of them had been produced and deployed, Maus tanks could have changed the outcome of World War II. Others, however, believe that even if Maus tanks had rolled across the battlefields of Western Europe, they would have been too hampered by their lack of mobility and range to have really changed the course of the war very much. The idea behind this monster of a tank was that it would be virtually indestructible, a moving bunker, essentially. To this end, the Maus was to be armored with 200mm hardened steel, theoretically making it pretty much impervious to any Allied tank cannon or infantry weapon. The heavy armor extended down in an armored skirt that covered the tank's tracks to protect them from attack and therefore immobilization. That contributed significantly to the Maus's immense weight. Size-wise, it had a 188-ton mass, a length of 10.2 meters, width of 3.71 meters, and a height of 3.63 meters. So that was it, guys. Hope you had fun. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for more military deaths. Till then, make love, not war.